Easter is here, and the hype is upon us. I love it. I think it's great. I had a few people, actually more than a few, I think at least a half a dozen, so if you're one of them, please don't feel bad. But you came up to me and said, Mick, you look good. You look like an Easter egg. So I know they were talking about the color, not the shape. So I get it. I get it. When I was in college, the college I went to was a pretty small college, and we had a fairly small gym. But our school loved basketball, and so not to this amazement, but think Duke, Camden Hall. It's actually a very small basketball court. You wouldn't know that from TV. Anyway, so you get in there, and it's loud, it's noisy, and the crowds are cheering, and it was one of those games where we were playing against some rivals, and our team was never really that good, but if we ever played a good game, there was plenty of reason to be cheer and loud. And I had a buddy of mine sitting next to me, and right in the middle of the game, he was trying to tell me a joke. Honestly, I don't remember the joke. But he kept trying to tell me this joke, and the crowd was loud, and he kept telling it to me, and then I think he was waiting for me to give him the laugh. You know what I mean? So you tell your joke, and you kind of pause. Well, the crowd is loud, and I tell him, well, that's dumb. Like, the joke was dumb, right? And he goes, what? Crowd's going crazy. I said, that's dumb. He says, what? Then I screamed, that's dumb! And of course, at that moment, the crowd was completely quiet. And everybody looked at me, not realizing I think I was calling a bad call by the referee. All eyes on me. Sorry. What if all of creation, the earth itself, stopped on its axis, and everything paused for just a moment? All the noise was gone, it was quiet, and all things turned their attention to this particular day. What would you say in that moment of silence? That's why we build up the hype. That's why ministers across churches, across continents, across time, spend so much time in the build-up of this week. Why worship leaders take time and dedicate time in trying to figure out songs. Why we think about this, why it's everywhere, because we truly believe that all of the cosmos, the entire universe, has paused for just a moment to pay special attention to what Jesus has just done. We cannot overestimate the power of this day. In John chapter 20, the reading this morning, the text, welcomes that type of hype. And so we begin the story in the dark. John chapter 20, verse 1 says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. And I want to tell you this morning, we cannot overestimate even the time of day that Mary goes to the tomb. This is very important. Even though we have made darkness our enemy, darkness is the place where new life begins. Let's think about it. God's creation begins in darkness. Birth of babies begins in darkness. Our baptisms begin in the dark waters. Death to life. Dark and light. For the author, this is very, very important. You see, the Gospel of John itself, the entire Gospel, actually begins in creation. So the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they will begin in a nativity scene, right? Or Matthew begins with a long list of names. And so we find Jesus at a stable in Bethlehem. That's not where John begins. If you turn to John 1:1, you know that the Gospel of John begins at creation. In the very beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We cannot deny how big this event is. You see, the meaning of Jesus goes beyond he dies so that we may live. Resurrection is the coming of heaven and earth. It combines them. It's where God's kingdom in heaven breaks through the veils of darkness and offers the world a new hope, offers the world grace and reconciliation. This is the trumpet call for God's people to rally together and offer the world a Jesus way of life. Like I said, there is hype. It's all about the hype and the colors and the excitement and the outfits and the ham and meals and whatever it is that you may or may not be doing today. Easter is all about the hype. So I'm going to try to get you excited with me. So this is, if I say Christ is risen, you as a crowd will say to me, he is risen indeed. Okay? So here we go. Christ is risen. Try it again. Christ is risen. Is that Cash? Good job, my man. Man, good for us. Sorry, Clinton Mitzi. I'm just kidding. Good job. Right? Be excited. Be overwhelmed. This is it. This is the moment. It's heavy stuff. It's way out there. So the question we have to wrestle with this morning is, with all the gravity and the bigness and the excitement, how do we bring this down to earth? How do we personalize the resurrection? How do we make Easter about me? So like Mary in John chapter 20, how many of us can say, I've heard Jesus say my name? Or how many of us, like Mary in John chapter 20, can say, I have seen Jesus? Are you not a little envious of Mary in this story? Verses 18, she says, I have seen Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but that statement alone drives my entire journey of faith. I long to hear Jesus call my name. I desire to literally see the face of Jesus. It is in my prayer life, in reading scripture, in my ministry, in my time of worship. I want to see Jesus. I want to personalize Jesus. I love it when people ask that question. Do you want a personal relationship with Jesus? That is just not a one-time question, folks. That is an ongoing question in my own faith journey. Do I want a personal life with Jesus or relationship with Jesus? Absolutely, I want a personal relationship with Christ. But if I'm honest, there are times where I'm trying to figure that out, and I'm trying to grab onto that, and I struggle with that. What does it mean to have a personal relationship with Jesus? In my own life, in what ways am I going to figure this out? That's why Mary's testimony helps us identify what it means to have a personal relationship with Christ. You see, she enters this scene in a place of darkness. Darkness is very real. Her heart is broken. She's trying to find her way. And so on Easter, maybe some of you are also entering into Easter in a place of darkness. It's okay. Struggling jobs, relationships, own faith? How about life in general? And Mary says it is time to navigate through the dark. It's time to get through the dark. It's time to walk through it. You see, in our world, in our society, and sometimes even in poor Christian theology, we teach people to fear and avoid the dark. And that is completely false. Mary teaches us to walk into it, to not avoid it. Psalm 23, remember Psalm 23? It says, even though I walk through the valley of darkness, I fear no evil, for God, you are with me. And so instead of running away, she runs to the tomb. She makes it to the tomb. And I bet you once she makes it to the tomb, I guarantee you, in fact, that there's even more pain. Right? Have you ever gone to a place where, that's saying when it rains, it pours? So just once you think you've gone to the darkest of places, you finally made some movement and you get there and it's empty. The tomb is empty. Are you kidding me? All this effort, all this work, all this prayer time with elders or maybe counseling and all this money and all this time spent in helping in my life, or maybe doctors for my health, and you're telling me that I'm still feeling emptiness? This is it? And she does something extraordinary. She doesn't try to deal with it by herself. She doesn't isolate herself. She decides to run first to her community. That being Peter and another unnamed disciple whom Jesus loves. John 20. So Peter and this disciple, check it out. And while the story of Peter and the unnamed disciple, it's the first part of John 20, is interesting and curious, I find this story of Peter and the unnamed disciple creates more questions than answers. And maybe that's the point. For example, why does the author not go ahead and name the other disciple? We assume it's John because it says it's the disciple Jesus loves, but why not just give him the name? Maybe the author instead wants it one of those, those tests where it says fill in the blank. Maybe the author encourages you to put your own name in the story. Why is Peter a slow runner? We see Peter's personality come out when he runs headfirst into the dark tomb without any thought. And then there are linens scattered in different directions. What is that all about? And the disciples believe is what the text says, but then there's this extra part that says they believe and yet they do not understand that he rose from the dead. Okay, they believe, so what are they believing right now? Then Mary is back with us. And she receives a heavenly welcome from angels when Simon Peter and the unnamed disciple do not. Angels, right, when they show up, this is like a major moment when heavens and earth are coming together. This is a big deal. So Mary is the first witness. She's an apostle of apostles, right? Apostle means witness. Mary is mentioned 12 times throughout the gospel. She's named in all 4 accounts of the crucifixion and the resurrection. She is a devout follower of Jesus. She supports Jesus' ministry financially, Luke 8. And when everyone else ran, Mary Magdalene stayed. And yet, she's very much like you and me. For example, she had some serious demons in her life. In fact, Luke 8 says she had 7 to be exact. She was not that important of a person. She didn't have much chance or choice in life. And yet Jesus directly calls her. He says, "But you, Mary, are chosen. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation. You are God's own person." 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9. Mary is sincere and close with Christ. And so she enters back to the tomb, and she's weeping, and the angels have to ask this question, look, why are you crying? And her response is understandable. They've taken the body away. I don't know where they've put him. They've taken the body away. I get it, right? So you're still in the darkness. You're still vulnerable. You're still trying to figure things out, and you're just trying to grab onto just something, right? You're just trying to hold on to something that's going to keep you a little bit sane. And so maybe just taking care of the body, maybe just doing something. I don't know about you, but if I'm stressed out, I just got to do something, right? I don't want to just sit there and dwell and feel sorry for myself. She's in the dark. She's just trying to find some hope in her life. And then the gardener enters the scene. And folks, it is no coincidence. Again, we have to understand how powerful and big the scene is. It is no coincidence that the author calls Jesus a gardener. John, once again, is taking us back to creation, right? God is the first gardener. When Adam and Eve were present in God's fullness, and now Mary is with the Lord in the garden, in his presence. And so he asks, why are you crying? Better yet, who are you looking for? Why are you empty? Why are you in pain? Why are you angry? Why are you anxious or nervous? Why do you hurt? Do you feel like your life has lost purpose and meaning? Who or what are you looking for? I'm not a gardener, but I think gardeners can ask these types of questions because gardeners are gentle, they're caring, and they're very intentional. They're not looking for the quick fix. They are nature's surgeons, carefully removing weeds and nurturing wounded plants and increasing the harvest and fruit. Christ is the ideal gardener, even in our own lives, right? Again, it's not over. I wish it was. I wish at this point the hero shows up, but once again, Mary is feeling in the dark, and she says, "Sir, where is he? What did you do with him? I'll get him." And then Jesus does something so simple, so personal, and yet so grand and cosmic. Jesus says, "Mary?" John 10:3. Jesus calls his own sheep by their name, and he leads them out. You see, it is at that point, it is the point when Jesus specifically calls her name, the darkness flees. So do you hear Jesus calling your name? Clint, Bubba, Tara, Raquel, Brian. Do you hear Jesus calling your name? Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling for you and for me. See on the portal, he's waiting and watching for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come tenderly, Jesus is calling. Calling, oh sinner, come home. Jesus calls your name throughout your life. Jesus calls your name even if you don't always hear it. Right? I mean, we are consumed by the sin, the noise, and the chaos and the busyness of our lives. But if we intentionally pursue Christ's voice, we can hear him call our own names. He called your name, for example, at one point when you were wondering if this Jesus thing is really for real or not. He called your name at baptism. He calls your name every week and invites you to the Lord's Supper. And even daily, he calls your name. Each of you. He is specifically addressing you and calling your name. You see, Jesus' calling you by name is an affirmation that Jesus is personalizing this whole Christian thing, right? Let me explain myself. It is one thing to say, Jesus loves the world. I can say that easily. But to say, Jesus loves me, that's hard. Jesus is not ashamed of me. Jesus has already forgiven me. I'm part of God's kingdom, heaven and earth together. And so God invites me into this living, godly, new world order. God is calling each of us. So Mary hears her name called, and so she grabs Jesus. Of course, that would be any of our first instinct, right? That's even an instinct of a child does to a parent. Grab and cling on and hold on. Don't go. I'm not ready for you to leave. But Jesus says he must, because the mission of God calls Jesus to ascend to heaven so that the Spirit of God can rain down on all of us. And so what Jesus is saying in this resurrection is that we are part of an ongoing resurrection story. That the resurrection story does not end at the garden and the tomb. That it is ongoing. And so Jesus is asking us to be a part of this ongoing story. Jesus asks for us not to cling to the old. Because Easter is all about newness. It is about new hope, new ways of living, new faith, new light. You see, as churches and Christians, we are called to live as resurrected people. We are called to discern, to discover, to pray, to reflect on how God's newness is revealed in us and in the communities around us. We are called to live out that resurrected life. And so, I invite each of us this morning to personalize the resurrection story. How does the resurrection story impact me? See, it's only after Mary hears her name from Jesus, and it is only after she is called to let go of the old and to cling on to something new that she is able to say these very, very important words. I have seen the Lord. It is no small feat to confidently say, I have seen the Lord. For thousands of years before the tomb, God's people were unable to fully see the Lord. And it is through the resurrection of Jesus Christ that that we are invited into a life where we ourselves can say, I have seen the Lord. Today is Christ is risen. Christ is risen. Are you seeing that in your life? Are you hearing Jesus call your name?